Hi, everybody. It's Jeff at contextual.io, and this is the companion video for lesson number 3 of the Contextual Basic Developer course. In this video, we are going to introduce you to the event processing agent. Remember that in the prior videos, we learned about how to create an HTTP agent or an HTTP flow. And now we're going to create an event processing flow and therefore an event processing agent as well. So let's get started. Our goal for this lesson is to create a temperature monitoring agent that will generate temperature or weather alerts when a temperature exceeds a certain high temperature threshold or goes below a certain low temperature threshold. Remember that in the previous video, we actually put a restriction on the weather report schema to make sure that you did not get temperatures above 100 Celsius or below negative 100 Celsius, but that's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about a high temperature alert. For example, if the temperature goes above 38 Celsius, which is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or goes below 0 Celsius, which is, of course, freezing. In that condition, we want to generate an alert. And we're going to do that by creating an alert object, a record of type weather alert. So that's the first thing we're going to do today, is to create a new object type, and we're going to call it weather alert. And then our schema for this, I actually already have ready. So I'm just going to paste it in. And you're going to see, as we look at the schema, that similar to the one before, we've got an identifier, which is an auto-generated UUID. We've got a timestamp, which is also auto-generated. We've got a type, which is of type string, but is an enum. It has only a certain set of allowable values, which at the moment include high temp, low temp, wind, rain, and snow. We've got a description, and then we've got a rather unique property here, which is a report property, which is of type object. And what we're actually going to do here is to set this property equal to the entire report that we are generating the alert for. You'll see how that works in a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and push next and create this object type. All right, next thing we're going to do is to create a new flow. Not surprisingly, if we want to have a weather monitor, we've got to create a new flow for that. So we're going to create a flow and we're going to call it weather monitor. And remember that it doesn't automatically launch you into the editor, so we have to still open the flow editor. Now, this is a new kind of flow. This is not a flow that responds to an HTTP request, but rather this is a flow that responds to an incoming event. You don't have to worry with contextual about how it receives the event. We're going to show how to send the event to the agent in a few minutes, but at the moment, all you need to know is that you receive an event by using an event, a prepare event node, an event start node, and then usually in front of those two, we drop an inject node so that the standard kind of pattern for an event processing flow looks like this. Once again, the inject node is going to be used for testing, right? And the prepare event and the event start node are required. We won't go into exactly what they do at this point, but just to understand that if you want to have an event processing flow, you must have prepare event and event start as I've shown them here. Okay, so now we want to, I'm going to go ahead and modify the inject node so that it actually has a JSON payload, which is a weather report that we can use for testing. Okay, and now I'm going to drag a function node onto the palette. And this is new. We've not seen a function node before. Function nodes are nodes which execute JavaScript. They're called function nodes. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're using a JavaScript function inside the node, but a function node executes JavaScript. So if we open up this node, I actually have a JavaScript, the JavaScript I want us to use already ready. So I'm going to paste it in here. And we don't need two of those, so I'm going to remove one. So let's look at what's happening here. In this case, the JavaScript that I pasted in is going to first check to make sure that the payload, message.payload, has a property called temperature. Now remember, we should be receiving weather reports into this agent, but it's good coding practice to verify that the data that you've received is what you expect to receive. And then if it has a temperature property, then we're going to check that property to see if it's less than or equal to 0. And if it is, we're going to set the alert and the alert type. And if it's greater than or equal to 38, then we're going to set the alert and the alert type. Okay, and we're also going to set the alert description field, low temperature alert, and we'll include the actual low temperature here, which is in message.payload.temperature for station ID, and we'll include message.payload.station ID. So if you're not familiar with this kind of mustache notation, you can look it up, but it's a way of substituting values into a string in JavaScript. It does require that you use the backticks, these characters before and after, and not double quotes. And so that is our alert description. And we're going to put an alert description down here, but of course it's going to be a high temperature alert for that case. Great. So now it's push done. And now we have saved our function node. Oh, we didn't give it a name. So let's give it a name, which is check temperature. So we're going to check the temperature. All right. So now we're receiving the event with the prepare event and the event start nodes. And now the very first thing we're doing is kind of validating the payload, making sure it looks right, but also checking the temperature to make sure that it is in the range that we expect. And if it's not, if we've got a high temp or a low temp, we're setting properties on the message object that we're going to use now in the subsequent node, right? We're setting an alert, which is true, and we've defaulted it to false up here. And we're setting the alert type and the alert description. So what do we do with that now? Well, the next node we're going to use is something called a switch, which is kind of like an if-then statement or a case statement. And we're going to use the switch node to check and see should an alert be generated. So we're going to check the property message.alert, and we need to handle two cases, the case where it's true and the case where it's not true, where we're going to use otherwise. I could use true or false. It's a little safer to use true or otherwise, just in case for some reason that alert property isn't actually defined. So we're going to use otherwise, and then we're going to change this bottom setting from checking all rules to stopping after first match, and we're going to push save. So now we have a switch node and it has two outputs. It's got an is true and it's got an otherwise. Now we're going to wire another function node in after the alert node. And the job of this next function node is going to be to build the alert record, because we've wired it in to the is true use case. So it's only going to come up here if an alert is required. And I'm going to drop some JavaScript code in here to build the alert record. So we're going to call it message.newAlert, and we're going to create a new record that has the alert type, the description, and the entirety of the weather report that we received, which is, you remember, in message.payload. And we're going to call this node, let's call it prep new alert, and push save. So now we've built the new alert record. Now we need to save the new alert record, and we do that by using, just like we did in lesson 1, we're going to use a create object node, wire that up, open it up. We'll say create alert is what it's called, and we need to select the weather alert data type or object type. And remember that where we're getting the input from is a property called message.newAlert. So that's how we create the new alert. And then finally, we're going to add an event end property, because all event processing flows have to start with event start and prepare event, and they must end with either event end or event error. Must end with one of those two. So we're going to wire create alert to the event end, and then we're also going to wire the otherwise output of the switch node. Remember, this is the case in which we don't need to create an alert, and we're going to wire it also to the event end. And so now we've got our basic flow that is going to check the temperature, determine if an alert is required. If one is required, build that new alert record, create the alert, and then that's the end of the event. And if one is not required, then we'll just go straight to event end. Also, just like before, we need to handle errors. So we're also going to drag a catch node onto here, wire it into a log tap node, and we're going to set the log tap node's name to error, log out the complete message object, and set the log level to error. And then we're going to finish that sequence with an event error node. That's what the error handling should, the minimum error handling for an event handling flow should look like. Catch all, log tap, event error. Okay, so we're ready to save that. And now we need to talk about, how does this agent get these events to begin with? Well, first we have to have an agent. So we're going to go create the agent for our weather monitor. And we're going to set it to type event to flow. And we're going to select our weather monitor flow, select the latest image just like last time, select small again just like last time, and push create. So now our weather monitor agent is deploying. It's coming up. We're going to go to the operations tab and keep an eye on it and make sure that it comes up. So container creating is the first step. We're creating the container that is running this agent, or this flow rather, now pending, and we're just waiting for this to go into a running state so that we know it's up and running before we make the change that is actually going to send data to this agent. So we'll just give it a few more seconds until it shows running. And then, now that it's running, now we're going to go back to our object types, go to our original weather report, and we're going to add to this object type a trigger. A trigger on an object type is a configuration that is going to send that record as an event to an agent. And we can trigger an object type in 3 different cases. Post insert, meaning after a record has been created. Post update, meaning after the record has been changed or modified in some way. And post delete, after a record has been deleted. So we're going to add a trigger, and there's only one type of trigger right now that is supported, which is a send to agent trigger. And we're going to give that trigger a name. So we'll just call it send weather report. And you can see it's automatically filled in the agent that we're sending to. That's because there actually is only one event processing agent. So it has to be this one, right? If there was more than one event processing agent, you would have to select which one you want. So now we're creating the trigger, and now we have a post insert trigger on the weather report object type. So that means that anytime one of these weather reports has been created, it is automatically going to send that record to our new weather monitor agent. So now we're actually ready to test. So we're going to go back now to our weather report web form, and I'm going to refresh it, and now we're going to submit a number of new records. So first, let's submit a weather report that has a good temperature. It's in that range of 0 Celsius to 38 Celsius. So we'll send another one, let's say at 26, again for station ID Jeff, and it's been successfully submitted. Now let's send a high temperature report that's going to be above the high temperature range. So let's send one at 40. And that one will be successfully submitted. I'm going to refresh in between here so that we can see that message change. And now we're going to send a low temperature report. Let's make it -5, and we'll submit that. So now we've submitted 3 weather reports, 26, 40, and -5. So first, let's go back over here to our weather reports, to the weather report data, and make sure that in fact I did get a 26, a 40, and a -5, and I did. I got all 3 of those weather reports correctly. Now we'll go back out to the weather alerts, and let's see what weather alerts have been created. And we've got 2, as expected, 2 weather alerts. We've got a high temperature alert of 40 for station ID Jeff, and we've got a low temperature alert of -5 for station ID Jeff. So we know now that our web app submitted that report to our first agent. Remember, our first agent is our submit weather report agent. So it received the first report. It received the report first. Then it created the weather report object. The trigger on the weather report object sent it to the weather monitor, and the weather monitor validated the report and then checked the temperature. And if it was outside of the acceptable range, then it generated either a low temp or a high temp alert. And that's what caused our weather alert records to then be created. And of course, the next step would probably be to do something with these weather alert records as opposed to just creating one, but that'll be in a later lesson. So we've done it. That's lesson number 3. Thanks so much for spending some time with me, and we'll see you in lesson number 4.